if all is going according to plan, you all will hopefully not notice any difference between this video and the ones that I made before this, but I've actually changed my lighting setup a little bit. So fingers crossed it looks okay. I guess we'll see after we test this one out. But yeah, today we're looking at Studio Series Jazz, specifically the 2007 live-action movie Jazz. This is not the original release. This is from the, what was it, like a 4-pack, I think, that came out last year, I want to say, or maybe it was earlier this year. I honestly don't remember. But this was part of a multi-pack because I just did not want to spend the absurd amount of money that people were asking for this Jazz in the aftermarket. I did actually have that Jazz originally. I got it for I think it was like $7 on clearance and on sale from being on clearance at GameStop back in the day. But then I sold it and I missed it because this is actually a really fun figure. So yeah, I really wanted to get him back again, and then because of that multi-pack, I was finally able to. And I only got the multi-pack for Jazz, so I sold everyone else off little by little, and so ultimately, I technically got Jazz for free. Technically. Realistically, I did pay at least a little bit for him because of eBay fees and stuff like that. But the point is, we're looking at Studio Series Jazz, and this is a nifty little guy with a terrible weapon storage option. So we're just gonna get rid of this. But the way this works is there's this little tab thingy on the back of the weapon here that just slides into that little spoiler section, and that holds it in place, and I don't like it, so yeah, we're just going to put this off to the side and deal with that later. The vehicle mode looks good. It's it's Porsche. I think it's supposed to be a Porsche, and I like it. There's a lot of nice paint that went into this mode specifically. It's kind of like Revenge of the Fallen, or Studio Series Revenge of the Fallen Sideways, in that sense, where the vehicle mode got all the paint. There is some paint for the robot mode, but yeah, the vehicle has lots and lots of silver all the way around. You've got the translucent windows, translucent plastic for the headlights. Now, what's interesting is the plastic that they use. The main way I've found to tell the difference between the reissue Jazz and the original is the plastic used for the windows and the headlights is a bit more obviously blue. This, it looks blue on camera and from behind camera because of all the lighting that's going on here, but it looks much more gray in regular lighting. So that's kind of the best way I've found to tell. But yeah, it's a nice looking car. Mine did arrive with some scratches that I tried to buff out, kind of. You can just barely see. There's a little scuff there, and there's also one. It's really hard to see, but there's one right along there. I basically went in with a silver Sharpie and just tried to color it in a little bit delicately. It's not the same, it doesn't color match, but it looks better than there being this obvious color plastic where there should be car roof. So I did what I could. But aside from the all over the whole thing silver that you get, you also have some black in the grill section, red for the Pontiac logo. Is that Pontiac? Is that Porsche? I don't know cars. But you've got the red for the logo, and then you also have red for the taillights. So I think they did a really good job in terms of paint on the vehicle mode. And it looks good. It's got some nice shape to it. The panel lines are there, but they're not too terrible. I feel like this guy's ultimately cleaner than Human Alliance Jazz. Yeah, it looks good for what it is. It is a little bit on the small side. That is something to consider. This guy he's not tiny, he's not teeny tiny, but he is smaller than, than one may want, which I think does stand to reason, because this was kind of when the Studio Series was, it still is focusing on robot mode scale above all else, but But yeah, it does end up making the vehicles in some cases look rather small. Let's all over here and zoom out a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Now I think we can fit everyone in here. And can't forget Ova Prime. Stand up, loser. And Samus. And then for a more contemporary deluxe size comparison, here is Jazz with Burnout. And yeah, you can see that Jazz is a bit smaller. And I think I'm actually going to turn the brightness down on this just a touch, because it's a little bit washed out looking. But yeah, you can see Jazz is smaller in pretty much every direction, in actually literally every direction. But there's some cool stuff going on here, I will say. So yeah, and also like the aesthetics are completely different, the scale's different, that kind of thing. So it is what it is what I'm saying, which is what I usually say. And I know it feels like or sounds like I'm making excuses, but really, I don't know. It's a fun Jazz, and I don't really care that he's a little bit on the small side because he does a lot of other cool stuff. Oh, almost forgot our most important size comparison. There we go. There is Studio Series 07 movie Jazz with the duck tank. As always, before we get into the transformation, it is time for a brief mention of my Patreon, which you can check out. There's going to be a link at the end of the video or in the video description down below. I only have a single $1 tier, so that $1 a month gets you early access to new videos and also supports the channel. Also, I am experimenting. I've only done one actually as of this recording, but like I am experimenting with the idea of doing one-off videos just for Patreon. So if you want to check those out, that's also what you can do. And again, it's $1 a month. But if you'd rather support the channel without spending any money, which I completely get, you could always do the typical YouTube thing of like, comment, share, subscribe, that kind of thing. So with all that out of the way, let us transform this guy. Now, I'm going to do the allegedly toughest part first, and that is getting this front section taken care of. You can actually kind of see there might, like it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of marring up here around the paint. That's because of trying to like get my nail in there and like pull this piece out for the transformation. It's just such a pain. What I ended up doing was when he was in robot mode, like this whole piece is on like a telescoping joint. Not a telescoping joint, it's like a single slider type thing. But you can see how it comes out so much easier now, and I don't have to dig a nail in there. But basically what I did was when he was in robot mode, I applied just a little bit of shock oil to that cylinder there and, spun it around and pushed it in and out a few times. And that really helped to loosen it up. So now I can transform this without worrying about scraping off all that paint. But anyway, what you want to do is grab this piece, pull it out, rotate it around 180 degrees, and then push it back in. And this isn't like super solid, it doesn't click in place or anything like that, but it's not going to move unless you pull it out. So I'm going to do that first. Next is a little bit more complex because the legs and arms kind of both lock in at the same time because of how everything comes together. So it's really difficult to take one out and not the other. So what I typically do is reach in here and just kind of pull at this rear wheel well. Hey, I said it all in one go. And just kind of pull that out and down to unpeg it from here. And then pull this out. And as we pull this down, you'll see it untabs the arm from there. So you can get the arm moving. And this can actually rotate up here. And the reason you want to rotate it is because this joint here goes up underneath this hood piece. And that's a little tricky to do if you try to just come at it from the from out here. So you kind of want to come up and under like that. So anyway, rotate this down, and now there's a dual hinge system in what will be the shoulder that comes out like that. You can see the dual hinges there. So you want to bring that out so that the arm has clearance, and then rotate it 180 degrees. we'll just finish the arm over here. So you want to take this piece, and you can see the joint system in here. You just want to pull that out so it's straight, and then flip this little bit around to give him his hand. And there is one arm. Second one, same deal. You just pop this out, and then bring the leg kind of down and out of the way so we can rotate this arm down. Rotate it down, hinge this out, and bring it around 180 degrees so it's pointed up in relation to the hood. Hinge this out, flip this around, and there we've got the arms all done. Now for the lower body, actually no, before we do the lower body, we're going to take this entire front section of the car here, and that just flips around 180 degrees, the whole thing. And that's also why you want to rotate the arms to make sure they're not in the way of anything there. Now you can take the legs and bring them down a bit, like so. And then want to pop this piece out and hinge it down. Now this is the thing that is absolutely crucial going into vehicle mode. I know people have talked about this in the past because this figure isn't new, but I want to reiterate, this is crucial. If you want the car to hold together, when you bring these legs up, when you bring this assembly with like the lower body up, first you want to make sure that these tabs go in here. So you want to make sure those line up and get pegged in. But in addition to that, there is actually a little peg on the inside of the car roof section that does go into the butt, I guess you could say. So when you push this in and up, you want to make sure it clicks. Like, it's not super noticeable, but there is a click there. So push that in, and you'll feel it kind of click-ish into place. That is absolutely necessary if you want that car to hold together well. Otherwise, the sides will not hold together. So anyway, unpeg that. Bring this all down on this multi-hinge system. And we'll just bring the arms up and out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So this will swing all the way around. This swings all the way around. And then these bits here, these little arms here, will settle around and into these little tabs on the inside of the car hood section. So bring those up and down. And I like to kind of give them a little squeeze just to make sure they're all kind of settled in and lined up. And that locks everything together pretty well. And we can bring the legs down and we'll finish the legs. So in vehicle mode, these joints are like this. You want to pull this down 90 degrees. Then this whole thing flips up and makes the foot. And what you want to make sure you do is there's this little slot there on the inside of the wheel well, and there's this tiny little tab on the side of the foot. You want to make sure and get those lined up so that that tab's in there. It's not like super essential, but it keeps this from accidentally coming out of place when you're messing around with the legs. So you want to do that. And then to finish it, just come around the back here, pull down the heel. And same thing here, pull that out, bring this up and tab that into the side. It usually, if you do it right, it'll just settle into place. You don't even really have to futz with it at all, but something you want to make sure gets lined up. And then fold out the heel. Then you can take this back section here. There's this little extra bit here that comes out, and this does kind of click. So you want to fold down to unclick that. Fold that in as far as it'll go, and then fold this down and it just makes like a little turtle shell on his back. And lastly, not leastly, but lastly, I want to pull up the head and rotate it around. You can, if you want, push the head down when it's facing forward. I would not recommend that because it is much more difficult to get the head out of that cavity when it's like that. When it's rotated 180 degrees and pushed in, you've got those ears sticking up. You can just get a finger on those and pull it out like no problem. So yeah, I would recommend doing the 180 degree spin on the head. But with all of that done, there we've got Studio Series Jazz, and I'm going to readjust this a little bit just to try and get the light a little bit more. This will have to do. So, Studio Series 07 movie Jazz. This is really cool. I wasn't, like most people, I'm not sold on the Bayverse movie designs over other potential designs. Like, obviously this is G1 stuff. I always talk about wanting stuff that's different, but like the Bayverse stuff, initially at least, was definitely an adjustment period. And I still think that the Bumblebee movie and Rise of the Beasts designs, I think they mesh better with kind of taking recognizable references from like the older stuff and making it live action. But I will say, this is a cool figure. The proportions on this guy, I think because of the nature of it being a deluxe, are actually different than the official movie model and by extension the Masterpiece. And I actually like these better. His head's a little bit smaller, but it's also not like something that kind of threw me off with the Masterpiece figure of Jazz is the head kind of seemed a little bulbous, which I think, comes down to the design of the character in the movie, not the toy. Like, it's not the toy's fault. They're just trying to be accurate to the source material. But I like this better. I think the proportions are just better. It's a really, for what it is, smooth design. I do think the MP is cool in how so much of the car just kind of vanishes in the transformation, by which I mean like kibble-wise. Obviously, you've got car bits everywhere, but like, you don't have this. His back is actually much more clean looking. Technically, it's not clean because it's a live-action Bayverse design, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I don't know. But still, I will constantly be reiterating this. I just think this overall look for this character, this specific figure rendition of this character, I think, is the better looking of the options that are out there. Like, the Masterpiece looks extremely good for what it is meant to evoke, but I just think some of it's a little weird. The proportions are a little bit which is, again, the original design, not the toy. But like, I'm not really into that as much. The Human Alliance figure is a great figure. I love the transformation on that thing, and it does a lot of cool stuff. But the proportions are a little bit weird. The arms are, specifically the forearms, are either way too wide or way too thin, depending on how you have them oriented. The legs, it's got these like really weirdly puffy thighs and puffy shins and feet with like extremely narrow knees. It's weird. And then of course you got the original 2007 movie toys that are like, they were working with what they got. This though, these proportions just seem much more heroic to me. Like, the thigh to shin to foot ratio is a lot more even. He's got the, slim waist, but it doesn't seem as slim, partially because of the junk going on around here. But even if you move this out of the way, like, these little struts do help to bulk out his waist a little bit. And it kind of gives it this like tapered shape, like just silhouette wise. Obviously this is separate from this, but these little bits here really help to kind of make it look like the shape is much more tapered up into the car grille, bumper, headlight, chest section, which also helps. And again, like, the smaller head, yes, it's a smaller head and proportionally maybe off, but I just think it looks better because otherwise it looks kind of bulbous, and I'm not into that. I also, whether or not it's accurate, I like the arms. I like the look of having the headlights up around the shoulders, the wheels at the backs of the shoulders. It looks good. And yeah, you've got these big panels on the forearms, but it's not that big a deal, and you can still see the forearms just fine. He does have this, though, and this I'm not super keen on. But yeah, looks good. He's covered in lots of little small details, but what I like about this figure is it's not overwhelming. you still get a lot of smooth contours and surfaces from the car bits that have some detailing and greebling in them and stuff, yes. But you get that, and then also the more mechanical bits, yeah, you've got a lot of mechanical molding in like the calves and some of the thighs and the hips and some of like the midsection, but like it's more balanced than a lot of live action, specifically Bayverse designs, I feel. Like the actual thighs are relatively smooth, all things considered, which really helps to balance all the texture going on in the hips and the knees and calves. And same thing for like the fronts of the feet. So you've got these big panels that do have detailing on them, but you've got these smooth edges that really help to balance that out. And even in the midsection, you've got a lot of greebling going on here, but then it's a little bit smoother right around the waist, and like the car hood section, it looks good, but like you've got those smooth surfaces again, and just it all comes together really nicely. And then you get some extra texturing along the top, and the head is also like very, very textured, but I think it balances out really well. They do this weird thing where for some reason, one hand is like his actual hand, and the other one is curled into more of like a fist, which I guess is because of the weapon, but we'll see when we get to this that that's really not necessary. So I feel like maybe they could have done this for both hands or this for both hands. It just doesn't seem like, yeah, I don't really think they need to do that. But anyway, zooming in so we can look at that head, that is movie jazz, for better or for worse. I do like, though, that they left the visor down, not just because it's evocative of his original design, but because a lot of Bayverse Transformers really don't look good without mouth plates or visors or something, like with their faces. Some of the Decepticons, I think, pull it off, but that's because they're supposed to be monstrous. It doesn't really work as well for the Autobots, I feel. But anyway, it's his head. He's got the swept back ears. I like that they did the silver for the head, and like they didn't paint the whole thing, obviously, but I kind of like how they separated out the two, like the front and back halves of the head, so that it's not just a straight line separating the silver from the gray plastic. It actually kind of goes down and then forward and then down, so that at the very least adds some visual interest to it and still gives him that, like, you know, that silver helmeted look, but it looks more deliberate now. It doesn't look like he's got a half painted head, and like a lot of figures typically do. And this visor, though, this is where you can kind of see what I'm talking about with like the plastic color, specifically like this darker shade that comes off as looking a little bit gray. Like it's the same color as this, but it just looks a little bit flat and lifeless because of the coloring they used and the fact that it's a little bit more dull and just not as vibrant as the original figure. And that's a little bit of a disappointment, but I'll take this over the cost of the the full-on, the original figure. But yeah, it's for what it is, it looks good. And as you can see, the articulation is also, actually the articulation on this guy is surprisingly good for what he is. Got a ball jointed neck, so he can look all around, can look up and down, and then if you get this panel involved, you can look up further, but again, you want to not push it all the way down. You also get a little bit of left and right tilt, but not enough to really make a difference. The arms can go all the way around, and they can go out past 90 due to the way the hinging works, but because of this double hinge system, you can also use that as like a pseudo butterfly joint. So that's cool. I kind of like using that to just kind of angle the arms back a little bit. You get elbows, which are double jointed, and they do actually come up pretty far because of the nature of it, because you got the joint, the rotational joint there, and then the ball joint there. And then because you've got that ball joint, that works as a bicep swivel, and I like that the placement makes it actually work as a bicep swivel, not just like a forearm swivel, but you can get a little bit of wiggle there. You can't rotate the wrists, but they can angle up and down. Just bring it a little closer so you can see. You can angle them up and down. And that will come into play a little bit later when we get to the weapon. You do not get any waist rotation, which on the one hand, I feel like they could have fit it in there because if you see how this whole thing connects, I feel like there would have been enough space down here to give away swivel, but considering everything else going on with this guy, I don't think it's the biggest problem. It's just, you know, they probably could have managed it if they really wanted to, but maybe it's like a budget thing. I don't know. Got ball jointed hips that can go forward to ever so slightly past 90 and back to ever so slightly past 90 and out to 90, which is really good. They've got this really nice cut here that allows for that. We've got thigh rotation. There is a slightly under 90-degree bend at the knee, and due to how all this comes together, this is a little bit wiggly, but it's not that big a deal. You can't really bend this joint back any further, though. It stops there for the transformation, so you're not going to get a deeper bend unless you like modify things. But what is cool is with how this comes together, you still get ankle tilts. And they're pretty decent for what they are. Like you can see back here, that's straight and then that's tilted. It's not, you know, it's not amazing, but it's not bad. You know, considering the size of this guy and the complexity and all that, I feel like that's a pretty respectable amount of articulation, especially like that he's got the kind of, I guess, pseudo butterfly joints. He looks cool. I don't know what. I'm not big on the Bay vs. Designs, but this figure looks cool. Now, his weapon does fold up for storage in vehicle mode, but I want to unfold it. And there you've got his, whatever this is, gun. And you've got a couple of ways that you can hold it. You can peg it into his hand, which is what I typically do. And that just pegs in like you normally would, and he can, you know, do the zappy zaps with it. Or the other thing you can do if you unpeg that again, either fist can do this. I'm just going to stick with the same one, but if you rotate the hand around, this tab ends up in front there. And again, this hand can do it too. But with that tab there, you can take this gun, and there's this little slot on the back there, and that just plugs in to the end there, and that makes it look like his hand has turned into his blaster, which is also pretty cool. The only thing that kind of stinks about this is I can never really tell which way this looks best. I feel like the intention is to have this open bit facing up, but if you do that, like, it doesn't work to do that like this unless he's holding the gun underslung, which I guess gets the job done, but I don't know. It's weird, but you got options. Let's plug it into his hand for now. And yeah, he's a cool little guy, really. Like, he's a fun figure. The transformation is like satisfying to do. He's fun to pose, and again, he looks cool. I, as I said, would argue that he's actually the probably best looking live action Jazz figure that we've got as far as options go, unless and until we get some third-party offerings. I don't know. But he is a little bit small. He's not, you know, I feel like, and this is something that affects me too. Like, I feel like my perception, and by extension our perception of just how small some of these deluxes are, is a bit skewed. Because yes, he's small. He is undeniably small for a deluxe. But, like, all right, let me get all this extra stuff out of the way here. But he's not that small. It's not like Earthrise Cliffjumper. And, you know, Earthrise Cliffjumper was arguably acceptable because of the complexity of the transformation, all the engineering and stuff like that. And, you know, it's actually really impressive to get to get a figure like that at that size. And like here you can see, he is definitely shorter than Burnout. I want to say he's about 2/3 of a head shorter than Burnout. But again, there's kind of more going on here. like, Burnout is a great figure, and she's cleaner, she doesn't have a ton of stuff on the back, and what's on her back is supposed to be there. But overall, her transformation is much simpler, her engineering is much simpler, and if we're really stopping to think about it, aside from the waist swivel, the articulation on Jazz is actually kind of better. Like, he's got the double jointed elbows, he's got the, butterfly motion at the shoulders. I mean, yeah, Burnout can raise her arms up a lot higher because of the nature of that joint, but like, I don't know, it's not as cut and dry as I feel like a lot of us tend to think. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, since I've been talking about this, let me reach behind myself because my shelf is just right there. And let's get Burnout out of the way here and bring in Sideways. So you can see how 2007 Studio Series Jazz measures up with Sideways. And I mean, Sideways, his height is variable. It really depends on how you want to adjust those legs. Like if you want him doing like a monstrous kind of insectile digitigrade thing, that's one thing. If you straighten out the legs, that's another. But like, if we're doing straight legs sideways, Sideways is shorter at the head than Jazz. I mean, yeah, he's got these little winglet things for like window winglets that go up further, but like that's just, it's meant to be there, but like that's kibble. That's not really height. So like he's shorter than Jazz, and he's, again, like, Jazz has better articulation minus the waist swivel. And okay, yes, Sideswipe, or I keep saying Sideswipe, Sideways has the knees that can bend further forward, and also he's got a cleaner back. But like, I don't know, I feel like this, for its day, was a great Studio Series Deluxe, and it still holds up really well now. So that's my take on that. But finally, lest we forget, here is, let's readjust this real quick. Here is Studio Series Jazz from the 07 movie with the duck tank. And that's a wrap on Jazz. I can't really think of much else to say about this guy because I think I've kind of said as much as I want. He is, for what he is, for the time he was made, and all that stuff to consider, he is actually a really fun little figure, and I still maintain he actually looks pretty great for what he is. Absolutely would be nice if there were maybe some more paint on him. Would have been cool if they included a waist swivel, and if that back kibble could have cleaned up a little better. But it is what it is. I'm glad they reissued him and I was able to get a hold of him, because this is a very cool figure. I would not say it's worth paying those astronomically absurd aftermarket prices, but for a regular deluxe price, I think he's worth it, even if he is a little bit on the small side. And really, when you think about it, his car was a lot smaller, like really a lot smaller than Burnout. And when you see the two of them next to each other, it's like he is shorter, but not that much shorter. He's just not as bulky as Burnout. So like they do a lot with what they had to work with, and I respect that. But anyway, that is going to do it for Jazz. What do you all think of this guy? Or any of the other live-action movie Jazz figures we've gotten in the past? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you all for watching, and I've got a small assortment of other figures I'll be looking at in the coming days, so we'll see which one I pick to do next.